just having this very strong belief in what crypto and blockchain technology will become. And it will take a long time, but it will eventually become ubiquitous. For us, it was like the right choice, and basically looking at it as like our best risk-adjusted return opportunity out there. You can not only make sure you can survive, but also thrive in the tougher times as well.
Does it make sense to eventually explore doing a basket of these assets? Like maybe you hold Bitcoin with Solana, or maybe Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, right?
For us, we're all in on Solana. We do think that it is and will be the leading smart contract or high performance blockchain.
This episode is brought to you by Uphold, which is a great crypto platform that makes it easy to buy, sell, and stake crypto assets. Uphold has over 300 plus cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin and all the top altcoins, and they offer crypto staking on over 19 crypto assets. I've been a user of the platform for many years. They are safe and reliable. They don't commingle or lend out your crypto funds, and they are 100% reserved. You can review their transparency report. Uphold also offers an amazing rewards program where you can earn up to 5.25% on stablecoins. This rewards program also allows you to get 24-hour early access to new tokens that they list. And to participate, you just simply have to open the app once per month, deposit $50 once per month, and trade $50 once per month. And the stablecoins that they support includes Ripple's RLUSD. You can earn up to 5% on that stablecoin and 5.25% on USBC. So if you'd like to learn more about Uphold and all the great services they offer, visit the link in the description. Hey folks, welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and joining me is Brian Rudick, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Upexi. Brian, great to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, Brian, I'm excited to chat with you. Upexi was one of the first publicly traded companies with a Solana Treasury strategy. So I want to dive into the details there and learn more. But let's kick it off with your background. Tell us about where you're from and what's your professional background.
Yes, appreciate that. Yes, Brian Rudick, Chief Strategy Officer at Upexi, originally from Northeast Ohio. You grew up in the Cleveland area, went to school in North Carolina, grad school in Chicago, spent time in San Francisco and in New York, but I spent most of my career in traditional finance. I was managing a book of bank stocks, always in this long-short construct for funds like Citadel, Balyasny, Millennium. And it was really there where some of the banks that I covered that were the crypto fiat on off ramps like Signature and Silvergate kind of pushed me down the crypto rabbit hole. Decided that there are so many wonderful use cases and benefits that this technology can bring that it will take some time, but it will be ubiquitous eventually. Wanted to be a part of it full time. So I moved in early 2021 over to GSR, which is one of the largest firms in crypto, been around for over a decade. They are the largest digital asset market maker. And I led their research function for 4.5 years until I moved over to Upexi to become their chief strategy officer.
That's interesting because, you mentioned your backgrounds in TradFi, dealing with stocks and so forth and those type of assets, but now you have this convergence of crypto and publicly traded company, and the crypto impacts the stock price. So it's kind of like the merging of these two worlds. What's that like for you? It's like you get to do your kind of your old job a bit, but also new things.
It's been awesome. I've enjoyed every second of it. Yeah, I really think that this kind of hits on exactly my skill set and expertise. And I say that because digital asset treasury companies are literally just banks. And so I think it's enabled us to really internalize and understand where all these great benefits come from. So if you think about MicroStrategy, it's literally been the best performing stock since August 2020 when it turned on its Bitcoin treasury strategy. It's more than tripled the return of Bitcoin, and it's been barely leveraged. So there has to be some value creation there. And so really comes from what I would call capital markets arbitrage. When they are issuing equity at 2 times book or 2 times NAV, they're essentially selling a dollar for two or buying Bitcoin half off. It's how they've created 26 billion worth of free Bitcoin over the last 6 quarters for shareholders. And we can get into the math. I can give you an example. But the other way that I think about it is banks essentially borrow money from depositors. They pay an interest rate on that, and then they lend it to borrowers. They pay, and they earn a higher yield on that And so they earn spread income, which is the difference between the yield on loans and their cost of deposits. And then the market will essentially, is a simplification, but present value all of that future spread income, add it to the current book value, and then banks will trade above book. And we're the exact same way, actually. So we borrow funds or raise funds from the capital markets. We invest into Solana. We earn the spread between the return on SOL and our cost of capital. The market will then present value all that spread, add it to our NAV, and then that'll work out to something that is, above one, which we can then monetize for the benefit of shareholders.
I've never heard anyone categorize it as a bank, that these digital asset treasury companies are banks. And it's fascinating the way you broke it down, because you are operating like a bank, even though it's not fiat per se, you're using crypto assets. And, I want to break this out in layman's terms, because there's still a lot of people who this concept is still foreign to them. Like, why does holding a crypto asset increase the stock price? Is it simply that this asset continues to appreciate in value, and that's what's driving the volatility is driving all this?
So there's a couple ways I could think of it. So I would say that digital asset treasury companies can and should trade at a premium to underlying NAV when the market has strong expectations of forward digital asset returns. And so from my first example, if they think that the return on the digital asset will outpace the cost of capital, that company will earn spread every year, and that will be added to the NAV, and then that'll cause you to trade at this premium. Another way you could think about it is like folks just want to access crypto in the form of a familiar equity security. You saw that with Grayscale's GSOL closed-end Solana Trust. It routinely traded at a 500% plus premium, and that was simply because folks wanted to access Solana in their Schwab account. And then the last reason I'd say is folks want access to these different value accrual mechanisms that you can't get with owning the tokens natively or in alternative instruments like an ETF. And these are things that DATs can uniquely do. So, this is issuing equity above book, which is by definition accretive. This is things like staking or running validators to where you can earn additional commissions. And this is things like buying locked tokens at this discount for built-in gains for shareholders. And so add all that up and folks are willing to pay a premium. I've got other examples that can kind of explain this numerically, but I know that was a lot. So I'll stop there.
No, that's great, and thank you for doing that, because I think it's important for folks to wrap their heads around this. I think there's still a lot of skeptics, and there are people who just, once again, the education barrier. They just need to understand all these different moving parts and components, and how it's playing out, and why this is happening. Right? The so what question is answered. So tell us about Upexi, the history of the company, and why it decided to make this move to have Solana as a treasury asset.
Yes. So Upexi is and was a consumer brands company. So it owns different consumer brands that it sells either direct to consumer or via Amazon. It was making and continues to make roughly 15 million in annually recurring revenue. It's roughly break even. And then candidly, I think Upexi was trying to figure out how to increase its growth opportunities. And before I'd even met Upexi, they had announced back in February that they wanted to establish this crypto treasury. And while I was at GSR, I was talking to our founder, Chris, and basically telling him we should try to create the MicroStrategy of Solana. Really wasn't rocket science. You could just see all the value that MicroStrategy had created and all of their wild success. And then Sol Strategies, which is up in Canada, is trading at 5 times its NAV.
Mm.
And so having this background in equities is basically like if MicroStrategy is trading at 2 times, Sol Strategies is trading at 5 times. I've got reasons why a smaller company and one underpinned by a smaller token, but these additional value accrual mechanisms should trade at a premium to something like MicroStrategy. There's no reason why if we figured out how to create one, um, then we shouldn't trade at this premium valuation as well. And so at GSR, we contacted investment bankers. They introduced us to Upexi. Upexi was already going down this route, as I mentioned. And then it just made sense while I was at GSR for GSR and for me to lead that investment in that $100 million pipe, which was actually the first large scale pipe for an altcoin treasury company. And what I'd say is when we did it, like that 100 million was eye popping and kind of gave everybody the blueprint. And it was really difficult to get to that 100 million because like it was untested. And then as folks saw that, hey, this actually works, there is a reason why these companies should trade above book value, and people became more educated. You've seen like over 100 of these now. But that was essentially how Upexi kind of pivoted into digital assets. And then from there, it just made sense for me to join Upexi and continue to push on this with our management team.
Oh, absolutely. How much Solana are you currently holding, and how much capital have you raised to purchase Solana?
Yeah, we raised 100 million in our initial pipe, essentially, and then we raised an additional 200 million subsequent to that. 50 million was in equity, 150 million was in this very innovative in-kind convertible note, where there's actually very little risk for the investor or for the company because all the SOL that is contributed as consideration for that's held in this triparty arrangement at this qualified custodian. So if at the end of the 2 years, the investor hasn't converted to Upexi equity, they literally just get their SOL back. So they're basically in the same spot, but they have this essentially free option to convert to Upexi equity, which they would do if they were much better off. And so we've raised 300 million. We've seen some appreciation in the price of SOL, and we've been buying a lot of lock SOL at this roughly mid-teens discount. And so we own 2 million SOL roughly right now, and the current market value is roughly 375 million. And that comes from both SOL price appreciation and then that discount as well.
You mentioned a qualified custodian. Are you able to tell us who that custodian is?
I'm not sure if we've publicly well, we have disclosed BitGo as one of ours. We put out a press release, and then we've got a couple others. We diversify amongst them for best operational practices, and I don't think that we've publicly disclosed it. And so, just as a public company, I think you can't say.
Oh, got it. Okay. Now, this is a follow-up question to maybe something I asked you earlier, and that is why crypto and not real estate? Why not gold? Is it because crypto has a much higher upside, and because it's still a young asset class? Is that kind of the ethos of why crypto?
Yeah. So, in my view, there's all these really wonderful use cases and benefits that you get with crypto that you don't get with other technologies. These are things like the removal of intermediaries, like the democratization of value exchange, and new constructs around ownership, governance, and business models. And it's such a nascent technology that anytime that you're this early, there's going to be a lot of volatility and speculation around what this could become. But actually, if you look at the underlying fundamentals, if you look at like crypto users or number of developers or uh, number of transactions, like all this stuff is up and to the right. And so we were just looking at that. And at the end of the day, like valuation and values will follow fundamentals, and just having this very strong belief in what crypto and blockchain technology will become. And it will take a long time, but it will eventually become ubiquitous. For us, it was like the right choice, and basically looking at it as like our best risk adjusted return opportunity out there.
Oh, for sure. And so what do you think the timeline might be? This is a hard question for the lifespan of this strategy, because eventually there's going to be more liquidity. These assets are going to be less volatile. You mentioned they'll become ubiquitous where they're everywhere and everybody can access it. So do I necessarily need to go buy Upexi's stock 15 years from now? Just as an example. I don't know. This once again, this is a very different asset class in a sense that many of it of the supply is hard cap. It's globally distributed, so you have liquidity coming in from all parts of the world. So, what is like your time span or timeline for the for this strategy, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it remains to be seen. But what I note is like a lot of this is predicated on any treasury company. So a couple things. First is when analyzing any treasury company, the biggest determinant of how they'll do is the token that they're underpinned by. And so for us, we feel very strongly that Solana is likely the end game winning high performance blockchain. You have to not only be sure that the token will be around in 5 years, where most altcoins really aren't, but also that it will do well. And so, for one, like we feel very fortunate to be underpinned by Solana, and that was an intentional choice on our part. The second thing is a big key piece that the business model is predicated on is trading at this premium to book. And so in my mind, when you ask like when will the party stop, it's like when these companies stop trading at a premium. I would actually argue that you can and should trade at a premium, like we were talking about during times when folks like forward view of crypto is positive. And then when folks think that you're not going to out earn your cost of capital, you should trade at a discount. And I just turned to MicroStrategy, and you can measure the efficacy of their treasury operations by looking at in their increase in Bitcoin per share. And so 2024 it increased 73%. 2021 it was something like 50%. And then in two bear markets it still increased, but was more like mid single digits. So all that's to say is I would argue that the model can and likely will go on pause during the inevitable bear markets, but then you can really, will eventually return to this bull market. And then, it's likely that in what we've seen in the past with MicroStrategy is like the companies will then return to that premium multiple, which you can then monetize for shareholders. So kind of remains to be seen, will ebb and flow. But I think like the model is here to stay, and depending on market conditions, can really utilize that and accrue a lot of value for shareholders through it.
And some of what you mentioned, I think answers this question, but I want to make sure I get every base covered here. So, what would you say to people who would say, "Well, I can go invest in a Solana ETF. Why should I go through Upexi as a sole treasury company?"
I would say for access to these different value accrual mechanisms. So an ETF can't issue equity above book and pull in additional accretion. An ETF probably will be able to stake, but right now, they're not able to stake. And an ETF can't go out and buy Loxol at a 15% discount. So
Mm.
for all these reasons, my view is if you have a solid view of like the medium term for a crypto token, a digital asset treasury company actually could be the best way to play it for many investors.
And then Solana offers staking capabilities. Are you staking any of your Sol? And if you are those rewards being paid as dividends, or are they just reinvested?
We are staking substantially all of our Solana. We're actually not running our own validators. We're delegating to a bunch of top validators. The reason for that is uh, what we're seeing is a lot of validators simply want stake. And so most of them are willing to pass back literally every economic possible. So for us, if we were to run our own validator, unless we thought we were going to attract a lot of delegated SOL and a commission that we could charge on top of that, we'd actually lose money by running our own validators. And I kind of think it keeps the story simple for traditional investors as well. Having been on the other side, I tend to think that people don't really invest in things they don't understand. And you have to start to explain proof of stake consensus mechanism. Just gets a lot simpler to tell folks like, hey, we can earn 8% on this. You don't see MicroStrategy out there, running Bitcoin mining or running rigs themselves. So we're staking it all and then we get that in kind. And so it just adds to our SOL per share.
Oh, that's great. Are there any DeFi components, or it's too early, or are you exploring anything that you can do to earn additional yield?
We're starting to, but what I'd say is we're trying to maximize shareholder value, but in a risk prudent manner. And I think that is actually somewhat unique among different DATs out there. And so our view is we're not going to take on too much leverage to where you could potentially get in trouble. MicroStrategy will only lever up to 20% of NAV. We're at roughly 11% right now. We're dealing with an asset that's, much more volatile than Bitcoin. Number two, we're not doing a lot of like on-chain degen trading. Like my personal view is like if we came out and this is not guidance, but finger in the air, if we issued equity at our current multiple, you could see a 50% increase in our SOL per share. And assuming that that multiple holds, like our stock would move commensurately with that. And just this ability to intelligently issue equity and increase SOL per share is just so powerful that in my mind, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to start looping, LSTs and trying to earn an additional like 2% per year or something like that. And I think we would consider it when we get additional regulatory clarity, but I think like we're not fully there yet. And then the last thing that we're doing is we're using like risk and operational best practices. So as I mentioned, using only qualified custodians and top validators, and we're diversifying amongst them. And We think that this positions us really well to weather any market environment and is a strategy that will resonate not only with like crypto investors, but also traditional investors as well.
So on that note, right, in mitigating risks, reducing your risk, not being over levered and so forth, how are you preparing for market downturns and bear markets, right? As we've seen the cyclical pattern of even the stock market, right? Things go up and down over time, depending on what the Fed's doing, global liquidity, all that stuff. How are you preparing for that? And, there's a lot of companies doing this. There's talks of some of these companies might blow up, and not necessarily because of the crypto assets, but maybe mismanagement. But I think you address some of that, right, with the things that you guys are doing to avoid situations like that.
100%. And so I think it's about being disciplined in the bull market. So, I mean, we've disclosed that we have a line where we can draw on, and we have 40 million that we've pulled on this. This is where like that 40 million relative to our 375 million of Sol Nav works out to like low teens leverage. It's tempting because we have more on that line that we could draw. And we obviously have this very positive view of Solana, but we don't want to do anything to where we'd ever be forced to sell. And particularly where we'd be forced to sell at the wrong time. And so for us, it's just about being very disciplined in the good times so you can not only make sure you can survive, but also thrive in the tougher times as well.
This trend of digital asset treasury companies, do you see this continuing to grow and more companies that are publicly traded, whether they're in the NASDAQ top 100 or S&P 500, starting to look at this strategy? Or would it then get too saturated where maybe there wouldn't be the same incentive or the volatility that would be needed to get the benefits, if that makes sense?
I think that you'll see more and more companies launch treasury strategies, and it's almost as simple as like most of the companies that have uh, embarked on such a strategy have seen their stock really work. I think management has a fiduciary duty to try to increase its stock price, and so I think you'll continue to see that. I do think that there's likely only to be 3 to 5 tokens where this strategy will work long term. Because, like I said, 95% of altcoins are down 95% over 5 years. There's only a handful that I think I can be confident on that will perform really well over a 5-year period. And then within that, I actually think there'll only be like 2 to 3 winners within each. And the reason why I say that is you need to kind of get to this breakout size and volume to really employ the full capital markets flywheel or MicroStrategy model. For instance, we're trading at roughly 2 times on this like fully loaded MNAV. Like when you make adjustments for things that kind of obfuscate the real or true underlying value that the market's ascribing to us. And so the way that MicroStrategy actually sells stock at 2 times is through like an ATM or an equity line. And in that instance, you're actually a bit limited by your volume because you can typically only sell like 1 to 3% of your volumes without pushing down your stock price. And so an ATM or an equity line is essentially a way to just the company to sell equity right out into the market. You really need to get to sufficient size to where you can get liquidity in the common, to where you can actually sell, hundreds of millions of worth of, your equity into the market each week. And then you can use that to buy digital assets. And you're seeing that with Bitmine Immersion. You're seeing that with SharpLink. We are working really hard to get there as well. We're hoping and feel confident that we can, maintain our lead and continue to be the canonical Solana treasury company. But yeah, so for that reason, I think that there's likely to be 2 to 3 winners in roughly 3 to 5 tokens, and then the rest I think can make short-term gains. But I wouldn't, want to be an investor for 5 years in a lot of the other ones.
Oh, sure. And does it make sense to eventually explore doing a basket of these assets? Like maybe you hold Bitcoin with Solana, or maybe Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, right? Or is it better to just stick to one asset? What are some of the considerations there?
For us, we're all in on Solana. We do think that it is like and will be the leading smart contract or high performance blockchain. I do think that when you go with one token, you keep the story simple. Like if we did a basket and we added like Chainlink and Python, you have to explain to traditional investors what a cross chain bridge and an Oracle is. I think like maybe they're out. I think Reserve One is a SPAC that launched that is using like a basket. So I think that there already are some out there employing that. But for us, kind of keeping it simple and just being able to tell folks like, hey, like we really believe Solana is essentially NASDAQ on chain, enabling internet capital markets. And, Upexi could be the best way to invest in Solana and to play that eventually, continuing to grow. Then for us, like that was the right choice.
Now, I saw just recently you brought Arthur Hayes, crypto OG founder, of course, has his own fund. I had him on the pod not too long ago as part of your advisory committee. Tell us about why Arthur and how he's going to be helping you guys.
Yeah, we announced the establishment of our advisory committee a couple weeks ago, and I think it provides a ton of benefits. So we're backed actually by 15 or 16 of the leading crypto VCs.
Mhm.
Maelstrom, obviously, it's his family office was one of them. So we maintain pretty close relationship with each of them. They're adding a ton of value in many different ways. And then we wanted to formalize that relationship a little closer with, some folks like Arthur who obviously, like, he's a legend in crypto. He knows so many people. We met with him earlier this week, and I mean, he was providing all sorts of great advice. And then obviously, like, he's got this really great visibility. And half of a DAT, the game for DATs is like increasing your visibility as well. And so he's already bringing us tremendous value. And we've announced him as the first inaugural member of the committee. We'll have four more folks coming on, some of which we've signed, some of which we're still looking for, and hoping to have as many big names as possible from both crypto and TradFi to really help us both with their expertise and with their visibility and access to capital, really.
Oh, absolutely. And what's on your roadmap? I know you touched on quite a few things, but anything else you want to highlight?
We'll continue to try to be as visible as possible. We've talked about and we've publicly disclosed we want to hire more folks, ideally with like a built-in voice, either in TradFi or in Solana. I think some of this can be through like this advisory committee, or this could be a more permanent position within the company. And we've said that publicly before. And so, really, just continuing to push on the visibility front. And then on the I guess, intelligent equity issue inside, like, the business model of these companies is to raise capital, as much capital as possible in this
Mhm.
risk prudent and accretive fashion. And so we're hoping to be successful there as well, in continuing to raise capital to invest and hodl as much Solana as possible.
I would love to get your take on the broader market at large. Obviously, we just had the Genius Act passed. That's a stablecoin bill. We got the Clarity, the market structure bill coming up September or early October. What is your outlook with these legislation pieces in place? TradFi coming all in on crypto. You got a digital asset treasury companies buying. ETFs are going to be launched by the SEC and much more. What are your thoughts and outlook on the market?
Depends on the time frame. I'd be a bit more positive near term just because these DATs, I think you'll start to see more and more large scale DATs and more tokens. And I think like it's probably in my mind the biggest reason why ETH moved up from 2,700 to 4,700. I think you'll start to see that with other tokens. But X that, in my mind, anytime you talk about like just the coming months, it'll probably ebb and flow with the macro, with traditional equity markets, with what's happening with like employment and inflation and monetary policy. But what I'd say is if you ask me over 3 years, I'm supremely bullish. Reason for that is because I do think we'll get market structure legislation, as you mentioned, likely next year. I think this has been the biggest thing always holding crypto back in the US. I think that all of these big tech companies and big finance companies haven't really wanted to disintermediate themselves, and certainly so if it would bring on additional regulatory and legal risk. And now, once we get market structure legislation, they're going to have to, because if they don't, they'll be disintermediated by those who do. And it's really these biggest companies that have billions of customers, built in trust, billions in capital, and top developers. And so I think we could actually see a step function change in usage and development. This will be something like Google Chrome adding a built in crypto wallet, Amazon accepting stablecoins. And I really think we could be on the precipice of onboarding the masses. And I just think like anybody like even tangentially touching crypto would be incredibly well positioned to benefit from that.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day those things are happening that you outline. And I think maybe as soon as market structure is in place, I think you're going to probably see a lot of announcement. It could be folks are working on some of these things, but to your point, like they can't release it to the public. They can't have the public access it right now. But once the clarity is there, it's game on.
100%.
Awesome. Brian, I love what you guys are doing. And it sounds like you got a great setup and you guys are taking the right approach to this. I got some wrap up questions here for you. First, if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Oh boy. I'd say outside of work, I spend most amount of time with my two daughters, and I think that they would enjoy a metaverse more so than I would. So I'd probably create one with things like castles and unicorns, and bring my girls, and they would, yeah, just have a ball with it.
Nice. Rapid fire questions. Favorite food,
Tonkatsu ramen,
favorite musician or band,
MGK,
favorite movie,
Gladiator,
favorite book.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
And when you're not working at Upexi, what are you doing for fun?
Spending time with my family.
Brian, great stuff. Looking forward to the future updates around Upexi, but thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.